A distressed woman seeks help after an altercation in her home.
She was quite hysterical. He attacked her and she shot him.
She did not know if he was alive or dead.
There was not a question of who did it. It was more of a question of why did it happen.
The investigation uncovers terrifying allegations of mental and physical abuse.
He's been coming after us for 3.5 years.
Did he ever get physical?
It's emotional like you wouldn't believe.
But when a series of lies are exposed, detectives must sort fact from fiction in this high-profile couple's history.
They would travel, they would go to functions, they were in magazines.
She was carrying a weapon in front of Secret Service.
She tells the nurses she'd been poisoned. Was she fearing for her life, or was she executing a thorough plot?
She didn't know what else to do. It got to that point where she snapped.
Lakewood Ranch, Florida is a private neighborhood known for its safety. But security gates can't protect its residents from each other. At 7 p.m. on September 27, 2020, sheriff's deputies are called to the scene of a domestic disturbance.
Dispatch receives a 911 call from an older man saying that his neighbor has just come to his house and that she had shot her husband.
She came in, she was quite hysterical. She said that he attacked her and she shot him. Just between you and me, the son of a bitch has been harassing him and threatening him for a long time.
The caller identifies the woman as 28-year-old Ashley Benefield. He says the victim is her estranged husband, 58-year-old Doug Benefield.
Doug and Ashley were not living together. They had not been living together for about 3 years.
She did not know if he was alive or dead. The neighbor was very concerned that he might be coming to the door next.
Where is the gun? Is it with her, or is it just...
I have it right here, man. I'm also armed if he does come over and try to harm her.
And Ashley's family is due to return at any moment.
Ashley was living with her mother and her daughter, and Ashley's mom decided to just take her to the park. That was typical for them. They went to the park every night in the summer.
I'm kind of concerned with her mother and the little girl might get back there and find this.
Deputies are running as fast as they can, okay?
When the neighbor was on the phone with the dispatcher, he told them that Ashley was going to come out. And they instructed him to tell her to have her hands up and just to walk out towards the deputies.
She was absolutely very much in a state of shock. It's a lot of information for the mind to process.
Ashley is unable to tell deputies what led to the shooting, so they put her in a patrol car and enter the house to look for Doug.
They find Doug Benefield in the back bedroom. He is semi-conscious.
The deputies on scene observed that he had one wound to his right leg and one wound to his upper right chest area.
They cut his shirt off. They tried to perform CPR and tried to resuscitate him, but he died before he was able to arrive at the hospital.
Law enforcement thought that it was a domestic dispute that had gotten out of hand and ended up with Doug being shot and killed.
There was not a question of, as they say, who did it. It was more of a question of why did it happen? What was going on between Ashley and Doug?
Doug Benefield was born on October 2nd, 1961, and grew up in a military family.
Doug grew up in Huntsville, Alabama. His father was working for NASA at the Space Center there on project development. His mother, Suzanne, was a stay-at-home mom. Doug's parents were at church most every Sunday, and that really made an imprint for his whole life. Doug finished high school there before going off to college. And his intention after Texas A&M was to go off to medical school.
The U.S. Navy offered to pay for Doug's medical school, but after he enlisted, his career path took a different turn.
He ends up operating off aircraft carriers as a naval flight officer during Desert Storm and making 2 deployments.
After the Navy, Doug used his family connections to become an entrepreneur.
In 1999, Doug retires from active service, stays in the Navy Reserves. He's gotten introduced to all the things going on with the renovations and the restoration of downtown Charleston. So he decides to open a restaurant, and it was fabulously successful.
Only one thing was missing from Doug's life: a family of his own.
When Doug met Renee at this Irish pub, she was a single mom, 2 boys, raising them by herself. Very, very intelligent, college graduate, very strong practicing Christian. All of those things attracted Doug.
Doug and Renee married the same year they met. Their daughter Eva was born 2 years later in 2001. They spent 16 years together until Renee tragically died of an undiagnosed heart condition.
The loss of Renee was just a crushing blow. It caused him to go even stronger into his faith.
Dealing with the tragedy of losing Renee the way they did, Doug and Eva became even closer than they already were.
The last thing on Doug's mind was another relationship. But the following year, he met a beautiful young woman named Ashley Byers.
In August of 2016, Doug's investor partners and their political action committee have decided that they're going to back Donald Trump. And then there's a presidential candidate event in West Palm Beach, Florida. And Doug's invited. At the time, Ashley is the events coordinator, a volunteer on the Donald Trump staff.
Though Doug was 54 at the time and Ashley was 24, they had a lot in common.
They bonded quite a bit over religion. They bonded over politics. They had the same political views.
They had a very faith-based approach to life. They also had a very open attitude toward guns.
Both of them were concealed carry permit holders, and Ashley was carrying a weapon the first night that Doug met Ashley in front of Secret Service. All of what Ashley presented, not only physically, but in her interest and in her belief system, grew that initial attraction.
Over the course of the night, Doug learned Ashley hadn't always been involved in politics. Her first love was dancing.
She began ballet at a very young age. She loved it. She loved to dance. She joined a dance company after high school, and she danced professionally up until her early 20s when she sustained a knee injury. She then segued into modeling and was working as a swimsuit model. And then in 2016, she and her mother went to the Robarts Arena in Sarasota to attend a Donald Trump event. And Mr. Trump picked her out of the crowd. And after talking with him, he hired her to work for him. Ashley gets along really well with people. So she did a very good job.
Doug was immediately smitten by Ashley, and the feeling was mutual.
She was attracted to what she perceived as maturity. He knew what he wanted, and he had the same priorities as her.
It was a mutual obsession. After a meeting at the political rally, they decided to get married just 13 days later in a private ceremony.
As a strong practicing Christian, Doug was completely set on marrying quickly. Doug doesn't tell anyone in the family about marrying Ashley. He knew he had to do it in private and quietly, or we would have stopped him.
After the wedding, Ashley left the campaign trail to start a life with Doug in Charleston.
They would travel, they would go to functions where they dressed very nice. They were in magazines.
In 2018, their family grew when Ashley gave birth to a daughter. But by 2020, it had all fallen apart. Now, Doug is dead after Ashley shot him in what appears to be a case of domestic violence.
While Ashley's in the back of the patrol car, still on scene, her mother returns from the park, and she has Ashley's daughter with her.
She approached the house and started seeing everything that was going on. She believed that Ashley was dead.
She walks up with the, "Oh my God, my daughter. He killed her. He finally killed her."
He's been coming after us for 3.5 years. For 3.5 years, we've been begging for help, and nobody has helped us.
Has he been arrested for domestic before?
He knows how to play the game.
Does he ever get physical?
It's emotional like you wouldn't believe.
Ashley's mother says they've already reached out to Ashley's attorneys, who called a therapist aware of Doug and Ashley's history to the scene for support. They stay with Ashley's daughter, while officers accompany Ashley to the sheriff's office to make a statement. At the station, they find her attorneys already there waiting for them.
The fact that the therapist was on the scene so quickly and that these attorneys appeared certainly made the investigators leery. This case was going to be very complicated.
Coming up, detectives hear about claims of abuse.
The most aggressive Doug had been with her was after she told him that she was pregnant.
But the crime scene raises questions about Ashley's story.
The trajectory of the fatal bullet indicated that he wasn't coming directly at her.
Manatee County sheriffs are investigating the shooting death of Doug Benefield. They're hoping to get a statement from his wife, Ashley Benefield, but her lawyers advise her to remain silent. Instead, investigators get a statement from a therapist familiar with the couple's complicated history.
Dr. Barbara Russell is a therapist who specializes in domestic violence, and Dr. Russell was very well aware of this relationship.
I first got involved with this case when I met Ashley in the spring of 2020 at the recommendation of her attorney.
Dr. Russell tells investigators that the Benefields' marriage started out like the perfect partnership.
Ashley always had a love of ballet, and she wanted to start a ballet company.
Doug knew that participating in such a thing would be the fulfillment of Ashley's dream, and so he suggested that they create this national ballet company and that he would finance it.
Doug, being an innovator, put the ballet company together with funding from his investor partners. In the summer of 2017, Doug and Ashley have begun to hire dancers for the ballet company. They've hired staff.
But according to Dr. Russell, Ashley soon realized that Doug couldn't fulfill her dream.
They started to have kind of some problems, financial, I believe. They laid off a handful of the dancers that had been hired.
The ballet pretty quickly starts to crumble, and with it, their relationship did as well.
Fights between the two became frequent, and Ashley said Doug turned out to be a different man than the one she'd fallen in love with.
He would try to use kind of controlling tactics, dictate what friends that she could hang out with, what she could wear. From what I had gleaned from different reports that Ashley made, the allegations that were raised started to really have credence.
When she learned she was pregnant, she had expected, if anything, that her being pregnant would make him less aggressive. And instead, it escalated the situation.
The type of things that he was doing escalated to shooting a gun into the ceiling.
Fearing for her life and the life of their unborn child, Ashley obtained a protective order against Doug. According to Dr. Russell, Ashley left him a note ending the marriage and went to live with her mother in Florida. But Doug couldn't accept it.
She had really hoped that he would stay away. Instead, he came to Florida.
Dr. Russell says Ashley spent the next 3 years in courtrooms trying to finalize the divorce, but Doug refused to go away.
He'd been showing up at the house more often. He had a tracker on Ashley's car. Ashley found evidence in his text messages that he was getting the reports from the tracker. She would often be driving around and would look in the rearview mirror, and he would be there.
By that point, we had gone through a couple years of cases pending in the courts. We still had the divorce pending and an attempt to co-parent with each other, but she wanted to have her daughter 100% of the time.
To escape the situation, Ashley and her mother began planning a move to Maryland.
She wanted a sense of peace. She was hoping that moving to Maryland would bring that.
But when Doug found out, he got a job in Maryland and insisted on joining them.
As the weeks got closer to this anticipated move, Ashley became increasingly fearful for her safety.
To authorities familiar with domestic violence, it sounds like a powder keg waiting to explode.
Doug is allowed to have visitation with his child, but Ashley was actually speaking to her lawyer about getting an injunction against Doug to prevent him from having contact with his child and her.
There was a great deal of concern that Doug would eventually do significant physical harm, if not take Ashley's life.
However, others that knew Doug find the allegations hard to believe.
His daughter, Eva, was in South Carolina at the time, but she knew in her heart that something wasn't right. Doug was an extremely conscientious, mindful person. I think every step he took was along a path of creating a happy family.
Ashley made false allegations against him to prevent any chance of him getting custody of their daughter. I knew that wasn't who Doug was, to ever physically abuse anyone, especially the mother of his child and his wife.
Law enforcement needs credible evidence to support her claims, or they needed to get to the bottom of what was going on in the family.
Just hours after discovering Doug Benefield shot in his home, detectives are learning the details of his alleged abuse. But they want to hear from his wife, Ashley Benefield, about the circumstances of the shooting itself.
I have a search warrant, okay? And your attorney's here. I'm going to give it a copy to both of you so you guys can read it.
Law enforcement gave her the opportunity to make a statement, and she refused.
Ashley was not in a good state of mind to give any kind of a statement. She was very overwhelmed emotionally.
Although she invokes her right to remain silent, Ashley cooperates with the rest of the investigation.
After they swabbed Miss Benefield for DNA and took photographs, they released her to go home.
Because Ashley didn't give a statement and there were no witnesses, law enforcement only could go based on what was found at the crime scene, Doug's body, and then what they could do through interviewing other people involved.
Detectives begin by conducting a search of the residence Ashley lived in with her mother.
The crime scene technicians recover spent shells in the bedroom. There were 4 shots that were actually fired.
There was a mattress, a hamper, and a backpack. Law enforcement found that in that backpack there was a firearm.
We knew it wasn't the murder weapon because we had the murder weapon. They also found another firearm in the pantry of the kitchen.
It was a red flag for law enforcement that this home was almost emptied, and yet there were 3 firearms.
The fact that there was nothing else in the house seemed to indicate that maybe they were expecting a problem.
One of the firearms belonged to Ashley's mother, and 2 of the firearms belonged to Ashley.
Doug was absolutely unarmed. He had no guns or weapons of any kind on his person. He didn't even have his wallet with him.
He's wearing his flip-flops like he always does. He's wearing a t-shirt. He doesn't have anything on him, nothing to defend himself.
Other aspects of the case are also concerning to investigators.
The fact that a therapist was on the scene within minutes is unheard of.
I received a phone call from Ashley's family law attorney. She asked me to please go over to the house to check on Ashley's mother. She reiterated that her mom had thought that it was Ashley who had been killed. I was absolutely shocked to hear that Doug was the one who had been shot.
Law enforcement started speaking to other law enforcement officers who had dealt with Ashley in the past. They learned that she was less credible than they initially thought she was.
Sheriff's deputies tell detectives about a report Ashley filed in 2017. She was convinced Doug was trying to kill her and the baby.
He sent her a birthday gift, which was tea. She claimed that it smelled funny when she opened the package, and she thought that it may have poison in it.
I contacted the bomb squad and hazmat team that came out to inspect the box and analyze it for what was inside.
Ultimately, they'd find that there was nothing malicious about this package of tea.
Ashley was not happy that law enforcement was not going to arrest Doug.
Investigators are forced to consider whether Ashley's tea poisoning allegations were intended to serve a different purpose.
Looking back at everything, it seemed she was trying to show everybody that he was such a bad person and that he would try to do this to her and the baby. At the conclusion of the interview with her that day, I definitely was left with the impression of there's something going on here on both sides of this. Maybe she's not being 100% truthful.
Coming up, Doug's loved ones cast further doubt on the circumstances of his death.
Doug was being accused of things that were impossible, that he would never, ever in a million years do.
And investigators suspect it might have been a cover-up for murder.
We had a motive. We had a history. We had a pattern of behavior on her part.
Over 48 hours into the investigation of Doug Benefield's shooting death, authorities suspect his wife, Ashley Benefield, has not been telling the truth. However, they need to be certain they aren't jumping to any conclusions.
It complicates matters because there's only other people's understanding for law enforcement to depend on to compare to the allegations Ashley's making.
Doug Benefield's loved ones tell detectives that the man they knew bore no resemblance to the abusive husband Ashley described.
Doug was being accused of things that were impossible, that he would never, ever in a million years do. Doug was a loving man that took care of other people.
All information that I got was a very different picture than one that Ashley had painted.
According to them, Ashley wasn't a victim, she was the problem. Doug's older daughter, Eva, says the tensions in their household started as soon as Ashley moved in.
She said that Ashley would throw tantrums and seemed jealous of Eva. She didn't want Doug to choose Eva over her.
Eva tells investigators that Ashley's jealousy was even more extreme when it came to Eva's mother.
Ashley came in and she wanted to get rid of Renee. She didn't want Renee's pictures. She didn't want Renee's home decor.
Eva also reported to law enforcement Ashley told her she needed to stay away from her father because her father had also killed her mother. Ashley also went as far as contacting law enforcement and trying to get Renee's body exhumed because she was making allegations that Doug had also poisoned Renee.
At the time, South Carolina police had confirmed with the coroner that Renee died of natural causes.
She never stopped doing that on a regular basis. Ashley consistently would accuse Doug of things that many times were not true and were unprovable.
When detectives review the court filings, they find some of Ashley's accusations had a basis in reality. But they were amplified to support her depiction of Doug.
It is clear that Doug did some things that would not be appropriate. Doug, in a deposition, talked about some of these behaviors that she was accusing him of. One of them was punching holes in the walls. He admitted he punched holes in the wall one time in South Carolina.
He also talked about the shooting of the gun into the ceiling. He said he did that out of frustration. He made poor choices and let his emotions get the best of him. But those things not only were separated in time, but still don't warrant Ashley shooting and killing him years later.
Investigators find the timing of the poisoning allegations to be of particular interest.
The spring of 2018, Doug reached out to my law firm to set up an appointment to discuss options for reaching out to Ashley because he and Ashley were getting ready to have their baby. She went into Tampa General Hospital the very next day after she got my email.
Ashley tells the nurses she's been poisoned and that she wants to deliver her baby. She ultimately ends up getting induced and then delivering her daughter.
Ashley not only doesn't put a father down on the birth certificate, she also doesn't give their daughter Doug's name.
Ashley used the alleged poisoning to keep Doug from seeing the child for 6 months until he took her to court.
And the judge, after hearing the evidence, said that there was no evidence that there was any poisoning and that Ashley was not a credible witness. And she ends up giving Doug visitation with his child.
Ultimately, they had to figure out time sharing and work out co-parenting on the weekends.
Over the next 2 years, Ashley responded by taking her accusations to a new level.
Initially, she said he was doing abusive things to her, and then when that didn't work, she changed to abusive behaviors towards the child.
Law enforcement takes domestics very serious. Claims of abuse against children. They investigated these cases to their fullest. We found there was never any evidence that Doug did any crimes against the child.
To investigators, it suggests Ashley was willing to do anything to retain sole custody of their child.
She was hell-bent and was willing to make almost any allegation she could to make that happen.
Was she fearing for her life, or was she executing a thorough plot to start her own life without Doug in the picture now?
Detectives investigating Doug Benefield's death believe Ashley Benefield might be trying to cover up a murder plot years in the making. And when they speak to Doug's attorney, she confirms their suspicions about Ashley's motives.
September 30th, just 3 days after the homicide occurs, there was a hearing scheduled with the family law judge to find out if Doug gets more custody of this child. They were going to go back before this judge who seemingly did not believe anything Ashley said.
She didn't know what else to do. I think it got to that point where she snapped.
I think the T situation was absolutely Ashley's attempt to frame Doug.
She knew that if she could establish a pattern that Doug had killed his first wife, Renee, then it would be logical that he would do the same thing to her.
When there's only one side of the story, it makes it an incredibly tough job to argue self-defense versus homicide.
To prove their case, detectives will need hard evidence.
They took Doug's shirt from the crime scene and analyzed that shirt for any residue from a bullet or gunpowder.
There was no stippling found on either the clothing or the body of Doug Benefield.
Based on the lack of stippling, they were able to determine that the firearm was potentially 6 feet away from his body.
If Doug were coming at Ashley, you would think they would be much closer than 6 feet.
Combined with Doug's autopsy report, the findings paint a clearer picture of what occurred.
The trajectory of the fatal bullet was from the right side of Doug's chest. This likely indicated that he wasn't coming directly at her in the sense of an attack. He was probably turning around, which then put into question whether or not her use of lethal force was actually necessary in that moment.
We would expect to see X, Y, and Z pieces of evidence to indicate that this was truly self-defense. And everything put together really says this doesn't seem like it.
On November 4th, 2020, Ashley is arrested and charged with second-degree murder.
The media dubbed her the Black Swan. She's a beautiful girl who was a ballerina and now is accused of a heinous crime. And it does affect the case.
Ashley's loved ones rally in her defense, and in the days leading up to the trial, an army of supporters march outside the courthouse.
They had bullhorns out there chanting things like "We stand with Ashley" and trying to raise awareness about what was going on.
When the trial begins on July 23, 2024, Ashley's attorneys use those grounds well to their advantage.
The defense made it very clear this was a case of self-defense and that Ashley didn't have a choice but to shoot and kill Doug.
Ashley said on multiple occasions that she was afraid for her safety, that she was afraid for her life.
Our way to combat that is to try and show that we had a motive, we had a history, we had a pattern of behavior on her part.
We were very concerned about alienating a jury or making them think we were picking on Ashley, when in fact we're just trying to show that she's been telling tales.
Ashley is the only one who knows for certain what happened that night. And so far, she's refused to talk. But in a surprising move, she decides to testify in her own defense.
Once Ashley was called to the stand, the entire dynamic of the trial completely shifted. We all kind of knew now it's going to get real.
For the first time since shooting her husband in September 2020, Ashley Benefield breaks her silence. From the stand, she walks the jurors through an emotional account of what happened.
Ashley and her mother were in the process of moving. Doug insisted that he help with the packing.
Ashley says Doug tried to force her to reconcile, and he wouldn't take no for an answer.
He wouldn't let me leave. I tried to leave. He stopped me. He was standing in the doorway. He said, "You're f***ing done."
Ashley says that Doug hit her in the face. This is when Ashley ran to her bedroom.
At that point, when Doug crashes through the bedroom door, what alternative is Ashley Benefield left with? She grabs the gun in an effort to defend herself.
She says that she started pointing the gun at Doug and told him to stop moving towards her. And when he didn't listen to those commands, she says that's when she pulled the trigger.
During cross-examination, prosecutors challenge the details of Ashley's story.
You say he slapped you?
I wouldn't know how to classify it. He struck me, he hit me.
Okay, so he's standing there. He turns to like this and starts moving his arms around. Well, show me. What was he doing?
It was very clear to us that Ashley's testimony on the stand was performance, not truth.
She would go through the motions of wailing and, convulsing and crying, but I never saw a tear. One of my goals was to get the jury to see that.
During my closing, I talked a lot about Ashley's manipulation, that she attempted to manipulate Doug, she attempted to manipulate law enforcement, she attempted to manipulate the courts.
After a week-long trial, the jury retires to deliberate.
In those moments, if you feel the weight of your work, you can't help but think, did I do enough? Did we give enough information to this jury?
6 hours later, they return with a verdict.
The defendant is guilty of manslaughter, a lesser included offense.
The jury coming back with manslaughter, I believe, is an attempt to give some recognition that this was a very difficult case. And I think it was probably the best result to come to justice in the end.
Ashley is sentenced to 20 years in prison. In a press conference afterward, Doug's loved ones address their feelings about the case.
We're thankful that the lesser charge was allowed. We knew we could achieve that. We proved that Doug Benefield was not in the condition or the person they tried to make him out to be.
Any message you'd like to send to Ashley?
We know this was traumatic for her also. No one wins in this case.
The outcome in this case has a significant impact on her daughter because now she's without both of her parents.
There's no replacing Doug Benefield. No one with his creativity, no one with his innovation. It's crushing not to have him around for Eva, for our entire family.
London is a city that breathes in secrets and exhales silence. Some nights, that silence feels heavier than others. October 2003, South London. A girl vanishes, and for a moment, just a moment, it feels like the city itself is holding its breath. It starts with something small, always small. A missed call, a delayed return, a door that doesn't open when it should. At 9:17 p.m., Emily Carter is last seen standing at a bus stop under a flickering streetlight. 15 years old, school uniform still on, slightly creased from a long day. Her blazer hangs loose, sleeves too long, swallowing her hands. Her tie is slack, her posture tired. Ordinary. That's what makes it dangerous. Ordinary. CCTV captures her in fragments. Grainy, distant. She shifts her weight, looks down the empty road. A car passes, then another. Nothing stops. No one approaches. For several seconds, she exists in isolation, just another teenager waiting to go home. Then something changes. Her body stiffens. Not fear, not quite, recognition. She turns her head slightly, eyes locking onto something outside the camera's reach. A pause, a calculation. Her fingers tighten around the strap of her backpack. One step forward, hesitation, another step, then she disappears. Not out of frame, not walking away in a direction the camera can follow. Just gone, as if the moment itself swallowed her. By midnight, her parents are calling friends. By 2 a.m., they're calling police. By sunrise, the first search units are deployed. Missing girl. Cold case. The phrases haven't surfaced yet, but they're already forming in the background, waiting. Emily's house becomes the center of a growing storm. Officers move in and out. Questions repeat. Timelines are constructed, reconstructed, then questioned again. Her mother clutches a photograph. Emily at 12, smiling wide, front teeth slightly uneven. She always comes home, she says, voice cracking in a way that doesn't sound natural anymore, like the words have been worn down from overuse. She knows the rules. Her father stands behind her, silent, arms folded tight across his chest. His eyes move constantly, tracking every officer, every movement, as if searching for the one person who can fix this. But no one can. The timeline begins to form. 3:28 p.m. School dismissal. Emily leaves with two friends. They walk together for several blocks, laughing about something small, something that won't matter anymore. They split at the corner near a bakery. Emily heads in the opposite direction. For 12 p.m., a corner shop. CCTV shows her entering, browsing briefly, selecting a chocolate bar. She pays in coins. Exact change. She smiles just a flicker at the cashier. Nothing unusual. Nothing memorable. She leaves. For 19 p.m., another camera catches her walking alone. Headphones in. She's listening to something, lost in her own world. A car drives past. She doesn't react. Then the timeline fractures. 5 hours vanish into nothing. No confirmed sightings. No reliable witnesses. Just empty space where a life should be. At 9:17 p.m., she reappears at the bus stop. And then she's gone. Search teams flood the area. Parks, alleys, abandoned buildings. Every place a body could be hidden. Every shadow that could conceal a secret. Dogs pick up nothing. Helicopters scan rooftops and backyards. Divers move through cold, murky water in the nearby canal. Nothing. No trace. No scream heard. No struggle reported. It's as if she stepped out of reality. The media catches on quickly. Headlines sharpen. Language intensifies. Mysterious disappearance. Teen girl vanishes without a trace. Community shocked. Her face appears everywhere. Printed, posted, shared. A frozen image of innocence staring out from lampposts and shop windows. People begin to recognize her without ever having met her. Fear spreads quietly. Parents tighten routines. Curfews are enforced. Strangers are watched more closely. Every unfamiliar face becomes a question mark. Detectives begin the slow work of elimination. Friends are questioned. Teachers, neighbors, anyone who crossed her path that day. Nothing stands out. No arguments. No threats. No sign that Emily was in danger. But something feels wrong. Detective Sergeant Alan Reeves is one of the first to voice it. People don't just vanish, he says during a briefing. Not like this. Not clean. Because that's what this is. Clean. Too clean. No evidence of force. No sign of panic in her final moments. No attempt to run. The CCTV doesn't show fear. It shows decision. She chose to step forward. That detail lingers. Days turn into weeks. The search scales down. Resources shift. Attention drifts. But the case refuses to settle. A man reports seeing someone near an underpass around the time Emily went missing. A girl. Maybe her. He isn't sure. Lighting was poor. Distance too great. His statement is log filed, quietly set aside. Another witness recalls hearing a car door slam. Time uncertain. Direction unclear. Fragments. Pieces that don't fit. Then, 3 days after her disappearance, something is found. A maintenance worker cleaning behind a row of industrial units stumbles across a backpack. Navy blue. Worn edges. Slight tear along one strap. Inside, school books. The paperback novel. Half a chocolate bar, wrapper crumpled. It's hers. The location raises immediate questions. It's nearly 2 miles from the bus stop. Not along any direct route home. Not somewhere she would have gone willingly. The discovery should bring clarity. Instead, it deepens a mystery. Forensics comb through the bag. Fingerprints. Fibers. Anything. Nothing usable. At least nothing at the time. The case begins to cool. Cold case. The term appears in reports months later. Quietly, almost reluctantly, Emily Carter becomes a file. A name on a list. Another unanswered question in a city full of them. Years pass. Her posters fade. Rain washes the ink into streaks. New advertisements are pasted over old pleas for information. Her face disappears from public view, but not from the minds of those who knew her, and not from everyone in the police. In 2006, Detective Inspector Mark Halford takes over the case. 3 years old, officially unsolved, unofficially abandoned. He doesn't accept that. He studies the footage, again and again, slowing it down, freezing frames, watching her final moments on an endless loop. Something doesn't sit right. It's the turn, not sudden, Not startled. Intentional. Recognition. He leans closer to the screen, watches her shoulders. The slight shift in posture, the tightening grip on her bag. She wasn't surprised. She was meeting someone. That changes the entire narrative. Halford reopens interviews, pushes harder, asks different questions. Not who could have taken her, but who would she go to willingly? A name almost surfaces. A rumor. An older boy, seen a few times near the school gates. Not a student, not a teacher, just present. No one knows who he is. No one can describe him clearly. But multiple students remember him. Watching, waiting. The lead is thin, but it's something. Halford follows it. And for the first time in years, the case begins to move again. Slowly, painfully, but forward. Because somewhere in that missing 5-hour gap, in that silent exchange at a bus stop, in that deliberate step into darkness, there's an answer, and it's closer than anyone thinks. Momentum in a cold case is fragile. It doesn't surge, it flickers. One wrong turn, one dead lead, and it dies again, slipping back into silence like it was never touched. Detective Inspector Mark Halford knows this. That's why he doesn't waste time. The idea settles in his mind and refuses to move. Emily didn't run. She didn't panic. She walked toward someone she recognized, someone she trusted, or thought she could. The distinction matters. He rebuilds a timeline, not from evidence, but from behavior. He maps her movements like a pattern, not a path. School, shop, streets. The 5 missing hours stretch across his board like a wound that never closed. 5 hours where she wasn't seen, or maybe wasn't noticed. He starts with the rumor, the older boy. It surfaces in fragments during interviews. Casual mentions, shrugs. I think I saw her talking to someone. He wasn't from school. Maybe late teens, maybe older. Descriptions shift, faces blur, but the presence remains consistent. A watcher, Halford pulls school records, attendance logs, visitor reports. Nothing official, no registered individual matching the description. But that doesn't mean he wasn't there. People slip through gaps all the time. He expands the scope. Local CCTV from surrounding streets. Archive footage. Hours and hours of grainy recordings from 2003. Most of it useless, degraded, overwritten. But some remains. Technicians isolate clips from days leading up to Emily's disappearance. After school hours. Street corners. Bus stops. Patterns begin to form. A figure appears more than once. Male, tall, dark jacket, face partially obscured, hood, angle, poor resolution. He never lingers long, never approaches directly, but he's there, watching, always watching. Halford studies the clips until the man's movements feel familiar. The way he stands, the way he shifts weight, subtle, controlled, deliberate. This isn't coincidence. The working theory sharpens. The man had been observing Emily for days, maybe weeks, learning her routine, her habits, the route she took, the time she was alone. Predatory patience, the kind that doesn't rush. But something still doesn't fit. If he was a stranger, why did she step toward him? Halford circles back to her personal life, digs deeper this time, not surface-level questions. He wants discomfort, secrets, anything that didn't feel important before. Teenagers don't always tell the truth. Not fully, not to adults. So he changes the approach. He interviews them again, but differently, one at a time, in formal settings. No pressure, no uniforms, just conversation. And eventually, something cracks. A girl named Hannah, close friend, quiet, observant. She hesitates at first, avoids eye contact, fingers twisting the sleeve of her jumper. There was someone, she says finally, voice low. She didn't want to talk about him. Halford leans in. Why not? Hannah swallows. She said people wouldn't understand. That sentence hangs heavy. What did she say about him? Not much, just that he was older, that he listened to her. Listened, a simple word, but it carries weight. Halford presses gently. Did she seem scared of him? Hannah shakes her head. No, not scared. Just different. Like she was keeping something important. That changes everything again. This wasn't random. It wasn't sudden. This was built. Slowly. Carefully. A connection formed in shadows. The investigation pivots. Phone records are pulled again. Not just calls and texts, but patterns. Repeated numbers. Unknown contacts. Deleted entries. Technology in 2003 isn't forgiving. Data is limited. Incomplete. But there are anomalies. A number appears briefly. No name attached. Only once. A call lasting less than a minute. 2 days before her disappearance. Then it's gone. No follow-up. No trace. Halford flags it. Tries to trace the origin. Dead end. Prepaid mobile. Unregistered. Disposable. Still, it confirms something. Contact was made. And likely not for first time. The 5-hour gap looms larger now. Not empty, but hidden. What happened between 4:19 p.m. and 9:17 p.m.? Where did she go? Who was she with? Halford reconstructs possibilities. Walking distances. Bus routes. Locations where 2 people could meet without being noticed. One place stands out. An abandoned retail strip near the industrial units where the backpack was later found. It fits. Isolated. Overlooked. Quiet after dark. He visits the site himself. The buildings are decaying now. Broken windows. Graffiti layered over years. The kind of place people avoid unless they have a reason not to. He stands there imagining. A girl arriving. Nervous, maybe. Curious. Expecting something. A man waiting. Not rushed. Not aggressive. Calm. Controlled. He looks at the ground. Cracked concrete. Debris scattered. No trace remains. Time has erased everything. But the shape of it, the possibility, it feels right. Then comes the next break. 2012. Forensic reanalysis of the backpack. Technology has moved forward. What was once invisible is now recoverable. Technicians isolate microscopic traces, skin cells, partial DNA, and this time they find something. A profile. Male. Incomplete but usable. It doesn't match anyone in the database. Not yet, but it's real. Proof that someone else touched that bag. Handled it. Possibly moved it. The case reignites. Media attention surges again. Headlines return. Old wounds reopen. Cold case breakthrough. New DNA evidence in missing girl mystery. The public leans in once more. Hope flickers. Halford doesn't celebrate. Not yet. DNA without identity is just a ghost. But it's a ghost with weight. He cross-references the profile against suspects. Known offenders. Local records. Nothing. So he widens the net. Years pass again. Quiet work. Incremental progress. No major breakthroughs. Until 2015. A witness steps forward. Late. Too late, some would say. But in cold cases, late is still something. She had been walking her dog that night, near the industrial area, around 10 p.m. Her memory is fragmented, but one image remains clear. A car, dark-colored, engine running. Lights off, a man standing beside it, and a girl. She describes the girl's posture. Still, not struggling, not running. Just there, frozen in a moment that doesn't make sense. Halford asks the question carefully. Did it look like she knew him? The woman hesitates, then nods. Yes. That word lands harder than anything else so far, because it confirms a pattern. Recognition. Contact. Voluntary proximity. Whatever happened next, it didn't begin with force. It began with trust, or manipulation, which, in cases like this, often look the same. Halford built the profile. Male, mid to late 20s at the time. Patient, observant, capable of blending in. Likely familiar with the area. Comfortable enough to wait, to plan, to control without immediate violence. Not impulsive. Calculated. The kind of person who doesn't leave obvious traces. But no name, no face. Just a shadow that refuses to solidify. The years stretch thin again. The case teeters on the edge of fading once more. Until 2023, a man walks into a police station. Unremarkable. That's the first thing noted. Average height, neutral expression, clean clothes, no visible signs of distress. He asked to speak about an old case. Emily Carter. The name alone is enough to shift the room. Officers exchange glances. A tension that hasn't existed in years snaps back into place. He's led to an interview room. Small, quiet, controlled. Hal Ford is called in. He enters, studies the man. There's something unsettling about calmness in this context. No nerves, no hesitation, just readiness. The man sits with his hands folded neatly on the table, waiting. Hal Ford doesn't speak immediately. Silence can be more revealing than questions. Seconds pass. Then the man looks up, meets his eyes, and says it again, clearer this time. I know what happened to her. Not I think. Not I heard. No, Hal Ford feels a shift instantly, the kind that only comes once in a case like this. A door opening after years of darkness. But doors like this don't always lead where you expect. Start talking, Hal Ford says. The man exhales slowly, not nervous, not afraid, relieved, like someone who has been carrying something too long. It wasn't supposed to go that far, he says. A single sentence. And just like that, 20 years of silence begins to fracture. Confessions don't arrive clean, not in cases like this. They come in fragments, in carefully chosen words, in pauses that stretch too long, and sentences that stop just short of truth. The man doesn't rush. That's the first thing Hal Ford notices. No panic, no stumbling over details. Just a slow, deliberate release, as if each word has been rehearsed in silence for years. It wasn't supposed to go that far. Hal Ford lets the sentence sit, doesn't interrupt, doesn't push. Then tell me where it was supposed to go, he says quietly. The man's eyes drift, not to the floor, not to the walls, but somewhere inward, somewhere only he can see. I met her before that night, he says. Not a surprise. Not anymore. How long? A few weeks, maybe more. Vague, conveniently vague. Where? Near the school, bus stops, places like that. Watching, waiting, exactly as Hal Ford suspected. You approached her? A pause, then a small nod. Yeah. No denial, no attempt to soften it. How? Another pause, longer this time. She looked alone, he says, not just physically, just the way she carried herself, like no one really listened to her. The word again, listened. It threads through the entire case like something deliberate, something designed. So you listen, Hal Ford says. The man nods again. Yeah. A simple answer. Too simple. What did you talk about? Nothing important. School, home, things like that. But Hal Ford knows better. To a 15-year-old, those things are everything. You gave her a reason to trust you. It isn't a question. The man doesn't respond immediately. His jaw tightens just slightly. I didn't force anything, he says. There it is. The first line drawn. Hal Ford leans forward, voice steady. You didn't have to. Silence again. Thicker now. Tell me about that day. Hal Ford continues. The day she disappeared. The man exhales slowly, like he's stepping back into something he's tried to avoid. We were supposed to meet earlier, he says. Where? He hesitates. Hal Ford watches closely. Near the shops, he says finally, not the bus stop. That aligns with the gap. The missing 5 hours. She came? Yeah. What time? I don't remember exactly. Another vague answer, but his tone shifts slightly, less controlled. She was nervous, he adds, kept looking around. Why? I don't know. A lie, or at least not the whole truth. What did you do? We walked, talked, for 5 hours? Another pause. Not the whole time. Then where did you go? The man's fingers tighten together. To a place, he says. Not enough. What place? An empty building. near the industrial area. The abandoned strip. Halford feels the pieces locking into place. You took her there. She agreed to go. There's that line again. Agreed. Consent twisted into something else. What happened inside? The man's breathing changes now, slightly heavier. The first crack in his composure. Nothing at first, he says. We just talked. Halford doesn't interrupt. She trusted me, the man continues, more than she should have. A statement that carries weight, but still avoids a core. And then, Halford presses. The man looks down for the first time. I told her I liked her. A beat. She didn't say anything. Silence fills the room. What did that mean to you? Halford asks. I thought maybe she felt the same. But the uncertainty in his voice betrays him. And when she didn't respond, his jaw tightens again. I pushed a little, he admits. How? I just got closer. Tried to make her understand. Understand what? Halford doesn't say it. He lets the man fill the space. She pulled away. He says, finally, there it is. The moment everything shifts. What did you do? I didn't mean to scare her. Not the question asked. What did you do? Halford repeats, sharper now. The man's breathing deepens. Ich hab heam. A simple action, but loaded. She told me to stop. Halford's eyes don't move. Did you? A long silence. No. The word lands heavy. What happened next? It just escalated. A word too soft for what it implies. How? The man shakes his head slightly, like he's trying to dislodge the memory. She tried to leave, he says. I didn't want her to. Why? Because if she left, she wouldn't come back. Truth, finally. Possessive. Controlled. So you stopped her? Yes. How? Another pause. Longer this time. Then I held her down. The room tightens. No one moves. No one breathes. And then Halford asks, voice lower now. I didn't mean to hurt her, the man says quickly, but intent doesn't erase outcome. What did you do? Halford presses again. The man's voice drops. She was shouting. I panicked. Panic, the word that appears in almost every confession. I just wanted her to be quiet. Halford knows what comes next before it's said. How did you make her quiet? The man closes his eyes. I covered her mouth. A pause. And her nose. Silence crashes into the room. Heavy. Absolute. How long? Halford asks. I don't know. A lie. You don't forget something like that. The man's eyes open slowly. She stopped moving. He says, no emotion, just fact. Halford sits back slightly. 20 years. And it comes down to this. What did you do after? The man swallows. I waited. For what? I don't know, for her to wake up. But she didn't. She wasn't breathing, he adds. Flat, detached. And then I moved her. Where? The man hesitates again. This time, longer than before, as if this part matters more. Not far, he says. Just somewhere no one would see. Not enough. Where? Halford repeats. The man's fingers tighten again. I'll show you. The words shift the entire atmosphere. Not just a confession. A location. After 20 years. Halford doesn't react outwardly. But inside, everything accelerates. Why now, he asks. The question cuts through everything else. The man looks at him. Really looks this time. Because that's the part that doesn't fit. Why walking after 2 decades? Why speak now? I saw her again, he says. Halford's brow tightens. On TV, a documentary. The case resurfacing. The headlines returning. I thought it was over, the man continues. I thought no one would care anymore. But they did, and that changed things. Halford asks. The man nods slowly. I couldn't stop thinking about it. About her. Guilt? Or fear? She was just a kid, he adds. A statement that comes far too late. Halford studies him carefully. There's something still missing. Something that doesn't align. You said it wasn't supposed to go that far. Hal Ford says. What did you mean? The man's expression shifts. Subtle, but real. I just wanted her to like me, he says. But Hal Ford isn't convinced, because cases like this, cold, calculated, patient, don't start with something that simple. They build, they plan, they prepare, and something about this still feels incomplete, like a piece of the truth is being held back, not hidden entirely, just delayed. Hal Ford leans forward one more time. Is that everything? He asks. The room holds still. The man doesn't answer immediately. His fingers loosen. His posture shifts. And for the first time since he walked in, he looks uncertain. No, he says quietly. One word. And just like that, the truth fractures again. Uncertainty is dangerous in an interrogation room. It means the story isn't finished. It means something is still buried, still shifting beneath the surface, waiting for the right moment to break through. Hal Ford doesn't move. He doesn't rush to silence. He lets it stretch, lets it tighten around the man sitting across from him like a slow, invisible pressure. You said no. Hal Ford finally speaks, voice low, controlled. So we're not done. The man stares at the table. His fingers tap once, then stop. A small, involuntary movement. The first real sign of discomfort since he walked in. There's more, he admits. Hal Ford leans back slightly, giving him space, but not freedom. Start talking. The man exhales. Longer this time. He's not just recalling anymore. He's deciding what to reveal. I wasn't alone, he says. The words land heavier than anything so far. Not alone. For a second, the room seems to shrink. Hal Ford's mind recalibrates instantly. Every assumption, every timeline, every reconstructed movement. Two people change everything. Who was with you? Hal Ford asks. A pause. The man's jaw tightens again. But this time it's different. Not defensive, protective. He didn't do anything, he says quickly. Hal Ford doesn't react to the deflection. Name. Silence. Name. Hal Ford repeats, sharper now. The man swallows. Daniel, he says. Full name. Another hesitation. Daniel Reeves. The name hangs in the air. Hal Ford's eyes narrow slightly, not in recognition, but in calculation. He stores it, places it, begins to build around it. How do you know him? We grew up together. How involved was he? The man shakes his head. He wasn't supposed to be there. Not supposed to be, but he was. Then why was he? Hal Ford presses. I told him I was meeting someone. The man says he didn't believe me. So he followed you. A small nod. That changes the entire dynamic. This wasn't just a controlled encounter anymore. It became something else. Something unpredictable. Did Emily see him? Hal Ford asks. Yes. How did she react? The man's eyes flicker for a moment. She got nervous. There it is. The shift. The moment trust fractures. What did you tell her? That it was fine. That he was just a friend. But Hal Ford can already see the pattern breaking apart. She didn't believe you, he says. No. A quiet admission. So she tried to leave. Yes. And that's when it escalated. The man nods slowly. But Hal Ford doesn't stop there. Where was Daniel during all this? The man hesitates again. Watching. The word sends a chill through the room. Watching what? Hal Ford asks. Everything. The tension thickens. You expect me to believe he just stood there? Hal Ford's voice hardens slightly. He didn't know what to do. The man says quickly. It happened fast. But nothing about this feels fast. It feels layered. Messy. What did he do when you grabbed her? Hal Ford presses. The man looks down again. He told me to stop. A detail that complicates things, but doesn't clear him. And when you didn't? Silence. What did he do? Hal Ford repeats. He froze. Another convenient answer. But Hal Ford isn't convinced. People freeze. Yes, but not always. And when she stopped moving, Hal Ford continues. The man's breathing tightens again. He panicked. Daniel? Yes. Finally, a shift. What did he do then? He said, we had to leave. Leave. Not call for help. Not check if she was alive. Leave. And you listened? No. A sharp answer this time. I couldn't just leave her there. The first flicker of something resembling responsibility or control. So what did you do? I moved her, the man repeats. But not alone, Halford says. A pause. Then, no. There it is. Daniel wasn't just a witness anymore. He was involved. How did you move her? Halford asks. The man's voice drops. We carried her. 2 people. 2 sets of hands. 2 individuals tied to the same act. Where? Halford presses again. The man exhales slowly. Further behind the buildings. There's a drainage access point. Covered. Easy to miss. Halford's mind locks onto the detail instantly. Hidden. Overlooked. Exactly the kind of place that could remain undiscovered for years. Did you put her there? A long pause. Yes. The word echoes. 20 years. And now, finally, a location. Halford feels the weight of it settle in his chest. Not relief. Not yet. Just confirmation. She didn't vanish. She was hidden. What about the backpack? Halford asks. I threw it. The man says. Didn't think about where. Careless. Panicked. Or calculated enough to create distance. And Daniel... Halford continues. What did he do after? The man's expression tightens again. He wanted to go to the police. That's new. And you? I told him no. Why? Because it would ruin everything. Everything. A word that reveals more than he intends. What happened between you two? Halford asks. We argued. How badly? Bad enough. Did he ever come forward? No. Why not? The man hesitates. This time, longer than before, because this part matters. He was scared. He says finally, of what? Of me? The answer lands hard. Not guilt. Fear. Halford studies him carefully. Because now, the picture is changing again. This isn't just a failed encounter. It's control. It's manipulation. It's dominance that extends beyond the victim. What happened to Daniel after that night? Halford asks. We stopped talking. Just like that. Clean break. Too clean. No contact at all? Halford presses. The man shakes his head. Not for years. Years. Meaning something changed later. When did you see him again? Halford asks. The man's eyes flicker again. Recently. Last year, he says. Another shift. What happened? He reached out. Why? The man exhales. He said he couldn't live with it anymore. There it is. The pressure building again. He wanted to confess. The man adds. And you? I told him not to. Of course he did. Did he listen? A pause. Then, I don't know. Uncertainty again. But Halford catches something in his tone. Doubt. Real doubt. And that's why you're here? Halford asks. The man looks up. For the first time, there's something close to emotion in his eyes. I needed to say it first. Not out of guilt, out of control. He wanted to own the narrative. Halford sees it clearly now. This isn't just a confession. It's a race. A race against someone else who knows the same truth. Where's Daniel now? Halford asks. The man hesitates, then gives an address. Halford doesn't react, but inside, everything accelerates again. 2 men, 2 versions of the same night, and only one of them walked in willingly. The other might already be on the edge of breaking. Halford stands slowly, signals to the officers outside. The room shifts, energy changes, because this is no longer just about the past. It's happening now, and somewhere out there, Daniel Reeves is either preparing to confess or preparing to disappear. And in cases like this, the second option comes faster than anyone expects. The address is written on a single piece of paper. One name, one location, one chance to finally answer a question that has haunted London for 20 years. Daniel Reeves. For 2 decades, his name existed nowhere in the investigation. No suspect file, no interview record, no mention in the original reports. A ghost. And now, suddenly, he is standing at the center of everything. Detective Inspector Mark Halford knows one thing about cold cases. The truth rarely appears all at once. It leaks. A confession here, a forgotten detail there, a name hidden in the darkness, until someone finally finds the right door to open. But every door has a risk, because once opened, whatever is behind it cannot be put back. The police move quickly. No media, no announcements, no public statements. Not yet. The last thing investigators want is to alert Daniel Reeves before they reach him, because suspects who have lived with a secret for 20 years don't always surrender. Sometimes they run. Sometimes they destroy evidence. Sometimes they disappear completely. The address leads them to a quiet residential street outside London. Nothing about it stands out. That's the unsettling part. A normal house, normal neighbors, normal life. A place where someone connected to one of the city's most disturbing unsolved disappearances has been living unnoticed. For years, officers watched the property from a distance. Lights on, car parked outside, a television glowing through the curtains. Someone is home. The man who was once only a shadow in another person's confession is now real. At 6:42 a.m., officers approach the door. No dramatic chasse. No attempt to escape. Just a knock. A few seconds pass. Then another. Finally, the door opens. Daniel Reeves is older now. Time has changed him. The young man who may have stood in an abandoned industrial area in 2003 is gone. In his place is a man in his 40s. Gray hair, tired eyes, a face carrying 20 years of something. Guilt, fear, or both. Daniel Reeves? An officer asks. The man doesn't answer immediately. He already knows why they are there. That is the first sign. Not confusion. Not surprise. Recognition. Yes, he says. The officers ask him to come in. He doesn't resist. No questions. No anger. No denial. He simply turns around, puts on a jacket, and follows them. As he walks past the doorway, he looks back at the house. Not like someone leaving. Like someone saying goodbye. The interrogation room feels different this time. The first confession came from a man desperate to control the story. Daniel enters differently. He looks exhausted, like he has been waiting. Halford sits across from him. A file rests on the table. Emily Carter. The name is enough. Daniel's eyes drop. You know why we're here, Halford says. A long silence. Then Daniel nods. Yes. The answer comes instantly. Too instantly. Halford watches him carefully. Your name has never appeared in this investigation. Daniel says nothing. You were never interviewed, never questioned, never identified. Still nothing. Why? Daniel closes his eyes for a moment, and when he opens them again, the weight of the past seems heavier. Because I was afraid. Of what? Daniel looks directly at him. Him. The room becomes still. Not Emily. Not the police. Him. The other man. The first confession. Halford already knows the name, but he wants Daniel to say it. Who? Daniel's voice drops. Thomas Ward. The name enters the record. A new piece. A new direction. Tell me about Thomas. Halford says. Daniel looks at the table. He was my friend. Your best friend. Once. The wording matters. Once. Before that night? Yes. And after? Daniel's expression changes. After that night, I didn't know who he was. Halford studies him, then explains what happened. Daniel takes a deep breath, and for the first time, the story begins from another perspective. A different version. A different truth. Thomas told me he was meeting someone. Daniel says, Emily? Yes. How did he know her? I don't know. A pause. He never told me everything. Did you know her before that night? No. That matches Thomas's statement, but not completely. You followed him? Daniel nods. I thought he was hiding something. Why? Because he had been acting strange. How? Obsessed. The word changes the atmosphere. Explain. Daniel looks uncomfortable. He talked about her. How? Like she was special. A pause. Like she belonged to him. The room becomes colder. That sentence matters. Because obsession creates a different picture. Not an accident. Not a moment gone wrong. Something building. Something planned. Why didn't you tell anyone? Halford asks. Daniel looks down. Because I was scared no one would believe me. Why wouldn't they? Because I was there. A powerful silence follows. Halford understands. Daniel wasn't only afraid of Thomas. He was afraid of himself. Because silence is a decision. And Daniel had lived with his. For 20 years. What happened when you arrived? Halford asks. Daniel's breathing changes. We were near the industrial buildings. The same location where Emily's backpack was found? Yes. Was she already there? Daniel nods. She was talking to Thomas. What did you see? Daniel hesitates. She looked uncomfortable. Uncomfortable how? She kept asking when they were leaving. That contradicts Thomas's story. She wanted to leave? Yes. But Thomas said she agreed to go with him. Daniel's face tightens. He lied. The first direct accusation. Why? Because he wanted people to think she trusted him. Halford lets the silence work. Continue. Daniel looks away. I stepped out. Why? I wanted to tell him to stop. Did you? I tried. What happened? Daniel's hands tighten. He got angry. At you? Yes. Why? Because he said I was ruining everything. Everything. Again. A word revealing intention. What happened next? Daniel takes several seconds, then says, he grabbed her. The room becomes silent. She told him to stop. Another pause. He didn't. The timeline matches. But the emotion is different, because Daniel is describing not a mistake. A choice. What did you do? Halford asks. Daniel looks down. I stood there. The admission hurts more than expected. Why? Because I was scared. Scared enough to watch? Daniel closes his eyes. Yes. No excuses. No attempt to rewrite. Just a truth that has waited 20 years. And when she stopped moving, Daniel's face changes. The memory is still alive. He panicked. Thomas. Yes. What did he do? He said we had to get rid of everything. Halford's expression remains controlled. But inside, the pieces are shifting again. Not a single crime. Not a single moment. A chain of decisions. And you helped him? Daniel doesn't answer. The silence is the answer. You helped him? Halford repeats. Finally, yes. One word. One admission. 2 men. 1 missing girl. 20 years of silence. But Daniel isn't finished. Because after a moment, he looks up, and what he says next changes the entire investigation. Thomas didn't tell you the worst part. Halford freezes slightly. What worst part? Daniel swallows. The reason Emily was there. The room goes quiet. What are you talking about? Daniel's voice becomes almost a whisper. She wasn't the only person Thomas had been watching. A new silence. A deeper one. Because suddenly, Emily Carter's disappearance may not have been a single tragedy. It may have been part of something much bigger. And somewhere inside 20 years of forgotten evidence. There may be other names, other victims, other secrets waiting to be found. The sentence changes everything. She wasn't the only person Thomas had been watching. For 20 years, investigators believed Emily Carter's disappearance was a single event, a terrible moment, a hidden crime buried beneath time, silence, and failed searches. But now, sitting inside an interrogation room, Daniel Reeves has introduced something far more disturbing. A pattern. Detective Inspector Mark Halford says nothing at first. In an interrogation, silence is not empty. Silence is a tool. It gives people space to reveal what they are trying hardest to hide. Daniel looks exhausted. His shoulders are lowered. His voice has lost the confidence of someone protecting a secret. Now, he looks like someone crushed beneath one. Explain, Halford says. Daniel stares at the table. Thomas watched people. People? Girls. The word sits between them. Cold. Heavy. Halford opens the file again. Names! Daniel shakes his head. I don't know all of them. Then tell me what you do know. A pause. Emily wasn't the first. The room changes. Because every cold case has a moment where investigators realize they may have been looking at the wrong shape of the crime. Not a disappearance. A pattern. Not one victim. Potentially more. Halford remains calm. How many? Daniel closes his eyes. I don't know. You were his friend. I know. So how do you not know? Because he didn't tell me everything. The answer sounds believable. But Halford has spent years studying people who hide the truth. Sometimes they reveal pieces. Not because they want justice. Because carrying the whole weight becomes impossible. What did Thomas do? Halford asks. Daniel takes a slow breath. He collected things. What things? Information. What kind of information? Routines. Places. Times. Halford feels a direction immediately. The same method used with Emily. Watching. Learning. Waiting. Did he write anything down? Daniel nods. Yes. Where? In his apartment. Did you see it? Yes. Why didn't you report it? Daniel looks away. Because that question has no comfortable answer. Because I was scared. Again, the same word. Fear. A word that has protected people like Thomas for years. What did you see? Halford asks. Daniel's eyes move slowly across the room. I saw names. Names of girls. Yes. Emily's name? A long pause. Then, yes. Halford feels the significance. This means Emily wasn't chosen randomly. She was identified. Selected. How long before she disappeared was her name there? I don't know. Guess. Days. Weeks. Maybe. Maybe. Another incomplete answer. Halford pushes. Daniel, 20 years have passed. This is your chance to tell the full truth. Daniel nods. I know. Then do it. Daniel looks up. Thomas planned things. The words come slowly. He liked knowing things other people didn't, such as where people would be, when they would be alone, who they trusted. The description is not of a spontaneous crime. It is preparation. Halford writes notes. What else? Daniel hesitates. He talked about control. Control over what? Over situations. A pause. Over people. The room is silent. Did he ever hurt anyone before Emily? Daniel looks down. I don't know. Did you suspect it? Yes. Why? Daniel's voice lowers. Because sometimes he would disappear. Disappear? Hours. Sometimes days. And he never explained? No. Did you ask? Once. What did he say? Daniel remembers. He said some things were better left alone. A chilling sentence. Because people who hide crimes often hide them behind ordinary words. Don't ask. Don't look. Don't interfere. Halford moves deeper. After Emily disappeared, what did Thomas do? Daniel's expression changes. Nothing. Nothing. That's what scared me. Explain. He went back to normal. Normal. The most unsettling behavior of all. No panique. No collapse. No visible fear. He went to work. He talked to people. He joked. Halford studies him. And you? I couldn't sleep. The contrast is clear. One man carries the weight. The other continues living. Did Thomas ever mention Emily after that night? Daniel shakes his head. Not directly. What does that mean? He avoided her name. Why? Because he knew. Knew what? That if he talked about her, someone would notice. Halford closes the file slightly. The investigation is expanding, but expansion creates another problem. Proof. Suspicion is not enough. A confession from one person does not automatically convict another. They need evidence. They need something that connects Thomas Ward to Emily beyond Daniel's words. Then Daniel remembers something. Something he has carried for years. There was a box. Halford looks up. What box? Thomas kept it. Where? In his apartment. What was inside? Daniel hesitates. I never opened it. Then how do you know? Because he showed me. Halford leans forward. What did you see? Daniel's face turns pale. Photographs. A cold feeling moves through the room. Photographs of what? Daniel doesn't answer immediately, because saying it makes it real. Girls. How many? I don't know. Were they people you recognized? Some. Who? Daniel swallows. Girls from the area. Not missing persons. Not confirmed victims. Just girls. But now every unanswered disappearance begins to look different. Every old report. Every unresolved file. Every name that never found an ending. Halford immediately orders a deeper review. Historical cases. Missing persons. Unsolved incidents. Anything connected to Thomas Ward. The search begins. And within hours, investigators find something disturbing. Thomas's name appears. Not as a suspect. Not as a criminal. But as a witness. Several times. Small details. Minor interactions. Places where he was seen. Always nearby. Always unnoticed. A person standing at the edge of someone else's tragedy. Until now, the media still knows nothing. The public still believes Emily Carter's story ended with one confession. But inside the police department, the case is transforming. The missing girl mystery is becoming something larger, something darker, because the question is no longer, what happened to Emily Carter? Now the question is, how many times had Thomas Ward done this before? The next step is obvious. Find Thomas. But when investigators move to locate him, they discover a problem. Thomas Ward is gone. His apartment is empty. His phone is disconnected. His workplace says he left weeks earlier. No forwarding address. No explanation. Just another disappearance. A man who spent years studying how people vanish has now vanished himself. And suddenly, the investigation becomes a race against time. Because somewhere out, there's a man who knows the truth. A man who may know the names in that box. A man who may know the fate of other victims. And a man who now knows police are coming. The cold case that waited 20 years for answers has finally opened. But the person at the center of it is already running. A man who spent 20 years hiding from the truth has disappeared just when the truth finally found him. Thomas Ward is gone. And for Detective Inspector Mark Halford, that changes everything. Because suspects don't usually vanish at the exact moment their secrets begin to surface. Not unless they know. Not unless someone warned them. The investigation room becomes a battlefield of questions. Who told Thomas? How much did he know? And how much time does the police have before another piece of evidence disappears forever? The first priority is simple. Find him. Teams move through every possible connection. Former workplaces, old friends, family members, financial records, travel history, anything that creates a path. But Thomas Ward has spent years building another skill, leaving no path behind. His apartment is examined carefully. At first glance, it looks ordinary. Too ordinary. A small living space, clean surfaces, minimal belongings, no obvious signs of panic, no photographs, no journals, no box, nothing that explains why Daniel Reeves described him as someone who collected secrets. But investigators know better. People who hide things rarely hide them in obvious places. They search again. Every drawer, every cabinet, every gap between walls. Then, behind a loose panel near the bedroom closet, they find something. Not the box. Not yet. A hidden envelope. Inside are handwritten notes. Dates, locations, initials, fragments. At first, they appear meaningless. Random observations from an ordinary person. But when analysts begin comparing the notes with old police reports, the atmosphere changes. The details match. A girl seen walking home alone. A teenager who frequently waited at the same bus stop. A student who took the same shortcut after school. Patterns. Not complete. Not enough for a courtroom, but enough to understand what Thomas Ward had been doing. Watching, recording, learning. Hal Ford studies the pages late into the night. The same question keeps returning. How long had this been happening? Emily disappeared in 2003, but Thomas's notes go back further, much further. The earliest entries date back to 1999, for years before Emily vanished, for years of observations, for years of opportunities, for years where someone may have noticed something and said nothing. The investigation expands again. Missing person files are reopened. Old reports are pulled from archives. Cases once considered unrelated are examined under a new light. And then investigators find the first connection. A 16-year-old girl named Sophie Bennett disappeared in 2001, 2 years before Emily. Her case had never been solved. At the time, police believed she ran away. There was no evidence of foul play, no suspect, no clear explanation. But now one detail stands out. A witness statement. A man seen near the area where Sophie was last spotted. A description given 25 years earlier. Tall, dark jacket, quiet. The same description appears again. And again, different locations, different years, different names, but the same shadow. The discovery sends shockwaves through the investigation. Because Emily Carter may not have been the beginning. She may have been another chapter. Hal Ford returns to Daniel Reeves. The second interview is different. The first time, Daniel looked like someone finally releasing a secret. Now he looks like someone terrified of what that secret has unleashed. You knew, Hal Ford says. Daniel looks confused. Knew what? That there were others. Daniel looks away. Silence. The answer is already there. You suspected. Daniel's breathing changes. I wasn't sure, but you suspected. Yes. The admission is quiet, almost impossible to hear. Why didn't you say anything? Daniel closes his eyes. Because I thought if I stayed quiet, it would disappear. Hal Ford watches him. And did it? No answer. Because everyone knows. It didn't. Secrets don't disappear. They wait. Daniel reveals more. After Emily's disappearance, Thomas became different, more careful, more distant, but he kept watching. He liked being invisible. Daniel says, "What do you mean?" He liked that people trusted him. Hal Ford writes the sentence down, because it explains something important. Thomas wasn't hiding because he was afraid. He was hiding because hiding worked. He knew how to look normal, Daniel continues. The words are disturbing because they describe the most difficult kind of suspect. Not someone who looks dangerous. Someone who doesn't. A neighbor. A co-worker. Someone standing in line at a shop. Someone who smiles. Someone who blends in. The search for Thomas intensifies. Authorities release no public information yet. They fear pushing him further underground. But privately, investigators begin tracking every possible movement. Then a breakthrough arrives. A bank transaction. Small. Almost meaningless. A payment made 3 days after Thomas disappeared. A rural hotel. Outside London. A place where someone could stay without attracting attention. Officers move immediately. But when they arrive, Thomas is gone. Again, the room has been cleaned. The bed made. The trash removed. Almost professionally. But something remains. A notebook, hidden beneath the mattress. This time, it isn't observations. It isn't names. It is something much more disturbing. Confessions. Not complete. Not written like a diary. Fragments. Sentences. Memories. Words from someone who has spent years replaying the same moments. One page catches Hal Ford's attention. A sentence written alone. I thought I could control what happened. Below it, I was wrong. The investigators read every page. And slowly, the picture becomes clearer. Thomas Ward did not see himself as a monster. That was the terrifying part. He saw himself as someone who made mistakes, someone who lost control, someone who believed explanations could replace consequences. The notebook reveals something else. A meeting, a planned meeting, a date shortly before Emily disappeared. Thomas had intended to meet another girl, a girl whose name is crossed out, but the date is there. The location is there. And investigators realize something horrifying. Emily may not have been the intended victim. She may have been the only one who disappeared. The investigation now moves faster than ever, because every uncovered detail creates another question. How many girls were watched? How many encounters went unreported? How many moments ended with someone walking away safely? And how many did not? Then comes the call. Late at night, a detective receives information from another department. Thomas Ward has been located, not arrested, located, because he didn't run forever. He went somewhere familiar, somewhere connected to the beginning, the abandoned industrial area where Emily's backpack was found, the same place where 20 years of silence began. Officers arrive under heavy rain. The buildings stand empty, broken windows, dark corridors, a place forgotten by the city, but not by the people searching for answers. And inside one of those abandoned structures, they find him, Thomas Ward, standing alone, waiting. He does not run. He does not fight. He simply looks at the officers approaching, almost like he expected this moment, almost like he wanted it, because after 20 years of hiding, Thomas Ward has finally returned to the place where everything started, and this time, he has nowhere left to disappear. The silence inside Blackridge Police Station felt heavier than concrete. Every detective in the incident room had stopped pretending this was just another interview. The digital recorder on the table continued blinking its tiny red light, capturing every breath, every hesitation, every word spoken by the man sitting beneath the pale fluorescent lamp. His name had surfaced in the investigation only 3 days earlier after a maintenance crew demolished an abandoned greenhouse behind the long-forgotten Hawthorne estate. Buried beneath layers of broken bricks, rusted tools, and decades of damp soil, investigators had uncovered something no one expected to find. It was not a complete body. It was not a weapon. It was a small rusted metal pendant wrapped inside what remained of a faded piece of blue fabric. The pendant carried the engraved initials EM. The initials matched 16-year-old Emily Marsh, the girl who had disappeared from Blackridge during the autumn of 2003, without leaving behind a single confirmed trace. For 23 years, her photograph had remained pinned to the station wall. Faces changed. Detectives retired. Families moved away. But the photograph never came down. Now, for the first time in more than 2 decades, the evidence board looked alive again. Across town, reporters crowded behind temporary barriers outside the police headquarters. Satellite vans lined the narrow street. Camera operators rehearsed live broadcasts while residents gathered in uneasy silence, whispering the same question they had repeated for years. Had they finally found Emily? Social media erupted before the forensic laboratory had even completed its preliminary examination. Rumors spread faster than official statements. Some claimed a serial killer had lived among them all along. Others insisted the police had known the truth for years and hidden it. Every theory fueled another. Every rumor deepened the fear that Blackridge had never truly escaped the shadow cast by one missing girl. Inside interview room 3, Detective Inspector Helen Carter never raised her voice. She understood something many investigators learned only after decades of questioning suspects. Silence often frightened people more than accusations. The man opposite her shifted constantly, unable to keep his hands still. His fingers trembled each time he glanced toward the recorder. He had already changed his story 4 times in less than 2 hours. First, he claimed he had never visited Hawthorne Estate. Then he admitted delivering building supplies there in 2004. Minutes later, he insisted someone else had driven the truck. Every correction created another contradiction. "You recognize the pendant immediately," Carter said quietly. I thought I'd seen one like it. You said you'd never met Emily. I didn't. But you knew what she wore. The room became perfectly still. Outside, rain began striking the windows with increasing force, each drop sounding like another second disappearing forever. Forensic specialists worked through the night beneath portable floodlights surrounding the collapsed greenhouse. The excavation expanded by only a few inches every hour. Every handful of soil was sifted carefully, every fragment photographed before removal. Investigators recovered old nails, shattered bottles, animal bones, children's toys buried decades apart, and finally something that forced the entire site to stop moving. A single human tooth emerged from the dark earth less than 30 centimeters below where the pendant had been discovered. No one celebrated. One tooth proved almost nothing by itself, but everyone understood what it could become. Back in 2003, search teams had covered those same grounds for only a single afternoon. At the time, the greenhouse still stood intact. Dense ivy concealed most of its foundation. Volunteers searched nearby woods instead, believing Emily had wandered toward the river. Looking back through archive reports, Carter noticed a sentence that almost disappeared among hundreds of pages. Greenhouse inaccessible due to unstable structure. No one entered. No one questioned why. No one returned. One overlooked decision had allowed 23 years to pass. Across Blackridge, memories awaken like ghosts. Shop owners remember the missing person posters taped inside dusty windows. Former classmates recall the empty chair left untouched for weeks after Emily disappeared. Teachers admitted they still hesitated whenever reading old attendance records. For years, the town had survived by convincing itself the mystery belonged to history. Now, history had walked back through the front door. Emily's younger brother, Daniel, had become older than his sister ever lived to be. He stood quietly outside the excavation site, watching forensic tents sway in the wind. Reporters shouted questions he ignored completely. He stared only at the ground beyond the police tape. His mother had died believing Emily might still come home. His father stopped speaking about her entirely. Daniel carried both burdens. Detective Carter approached him carefully. "We don't know what we found yet. You wouldn't be digging this long if it was nothing." She couldn't answer, because he was right. Meanwhile, analysts reopened thousands of archived documents that spent decades gathering dust and evidence storage. The original investigation filled more than 80 boxes. Handwritten witness statements faded with age. Audio cassette interviews required specialized equipment to replay. Old photographs revealed details overlooked by investigators working without modern enhancement technology. One image in particular caught the attention of digital analyst Marcus Reed. It showed volunteers standing near the greenhouse during the original search. At first glance, nothing unusual appeared. Then software sharpened the background. Someone stood inside the greenhouse. Not a volunteer, not an officer, a figure, watching. The face remained hidden behind cracked glass. No one in the original investigation mentioned another person being present. Marcus enlarged the image repeatedly until individual pixels dissolved into colored squares. The face refused to emerge. But one detail remained unmistakable. The figure wore a long dark coat. Exactly the same description provided by two teenage witnesses in 2003. Witnesses investigators had dismissed because their stories differed by 15 minutes. Perhaps they had not been wrong. Perhaps everyone else had been looking the wrong way. News of the enhanced photograph never reached the public. But inside the station, the atmosphere changed immediately. Detectives who had doubted the relevance of reopening the files now volunteered for overnight shifts. Retired officers returned to answer forgotten questions. Even those who once believed Emily had simply run away admitted the evidence no longer supported that theory. The interview resumed shortly after midnight. The suspect looked exhausted. His confidence had disappeared. Detective Carter placed an enlarged greenhouse photograph on the table. He stared at it for several seconds, then looked away. "You recognize it?" "No." "You looked too quickly." "No." "You looked at the person." "I looked at the building." "You never asked what year the picture was taken." His breathing became uneven. A bead of sweat rolled slowly down his temple despite the cold room. "I want a lawyer." You've had one available from the beginning. I don't want to answer any more questions. Carter nodded calmly. She closed the file, stopped speaking. Minutes passed. The recorder continued capturing nothing except shallow breathing and distant thunder outside. Most suspects feared accusations. Some feared evidence. But the longest silence always belonged to those terrified of their own memories. In the forensic laboratory, DNA specialists finally completed the first extraction from the recovered tooth. The sample had degraded significantly after decades underground. Initial analysis remained inconclusive. More testing would require days, perhaps weeks. No one announced results. No one celebrated discoveries that science had not yet confirmed. Yet something else emerged from the soil before sunrise. A tiny brass button, still attached to a fragment of dark wool. The fabric matched the coat visible in the old photograph. Not Emily's clothing. Someone else's. Someone who had been at the greenhouse long enough to leave part of themselves behind. Someone who never realized the earth remembers everything. And somewhere beyond the police tape, hidden among the growing crowd of anxious residents watching floodlights pierce the darkness, one person quietly turned away before dawn, slipped into a parked car without looking back, and drove out of Blackridge with trembling hands, unaware that a roadside traffic camera had just captured the clearest image investigators had seen in 23 years. The image from the roadside camera was not perfect. It was grainy, distorted by rain, and captured beneath the weak orange glow of an aging street lamp on the edge of Blackridge. But after 23 years of unanswered questions, investigators had learned one brutal lesson. A small detail could become the difference between another dead end and the truth. The vehicle appeared only for 12 seconds. A dark sedan moving away from Hawthorne Estate at 4:17 in the morning, less than an hour after forensic teams had discovered the first major evidence. The driver's face remained hidden. The license plate was partially obscured by mud. But one thing was clear. The vehicle had no reason to be there. The road was closed. The entire area was restricted. Only authorized personnel knew the excavation site had produced new evidence. Someone had been watching. Someone had known. Inside the Blackridge police station, the atmosphere had changed from uncertainty to urgency. The case was no longer a forgotten file pulled from storage. It was alive again. Every phone call, every database search, every old photograph carried a new possibility. The investigation that once moved like a ghost had suddenly become a race against time. Detective Inspector Helen Carter stood in front of the evidence board, staring at the timeline that stretched across 2 decades. A 16-year-old girl disappeared in 2003, a forgotten greenhouse. Aiden Pondon, a mysterious figure in an old photograph. A vehicle leaving the scene before dawn. None of these pieces made sense alone, but together they formed a pattern that investigators could no longer ignore. The person who knew where to look had always been close. That was a terrifying realization. For years, police searched outward. They investigated strangers. They followed rumors of runaway attempts, accidental disappearance, and possible abduction by someone passing through town. They looked at the roads leading away from Blackridge. They never seriously considered that the answer might have been standing inside the town itself. The first major breakthrough came from an unexpected place. A retired groundskeeper named Arthur Bell contacted the station after seeing the news coverage. He was 81 years old and had spent nearly 4 decades maintaining properties around Blackridge. When he arrived, he carried a small cardboard box filled with old notebooks. "I should have brought these years ago," he said. Carter opened the first notebook carefully. Inside were maintenance records from Hawthorne Estate. Dates, repairs, deliveries, names. One entry from November 2003 had been circled in faded blue ink. Greenhouse lock replaced. Requested by estate manager. Carter looked up. The greenhouse lock was replaced after Emily disappeared? Arthur nodded slowly. "I thought police knew." They did not. The original investigation files contained no mention of a new lock. No report. No interview. No explanation. Who requested the repair? Carter asked. Arthur hesitated. Mr. Adrian Vale. The name immediately changed the room. Adrian Vale. former owner of Hawthorne Estate, a respected businessman, a man who had publicly supported the search for Emily Marsh, a man who had appeared on television asking anyone with information to come forward, a man whose name appeared in the original investigation only as a helpful local resident. The detective searched his file. Nothing. No criminal record. No suspicious activity. No reason to investigate further. But now, 23 years later, one question remained. Why did Adrian Vale replace the greenhouse lock after a missing girl was last seen near his property? The answer came from a second forgotten document. An old property transfer record revealed that Hawthorne Estate had changed ownership 6 months after Emily disappeared. Adrian Vale sold the property and left Blackridge shortly afterward. At the time, nobody found it suspicious. People leave towns every day. Businesses close. Families move. Lives change. But investigators now viewed every coincidence differently. The interview with the first suspect was reopened. His name was Thomas Reed. For years, he had lived quietly on the outskirts of Blackridge. He worked as a contractor, repaired old buildings, and rarely appeared in public. When police first questioned him after the greenhouse discovery, he denied knowing Emily. Then came the evidence. A photograph recovered from an old-school fundraiser. Emily standing among dozens of people. And behind her, partially hidden near the edge of the frame, was Thomas Reed, not a stranger, not someone who appeared by chance, someone who had been there. When Carter placed a photograph in front of him, his expression changed instantly. "I fixed things at the estate," he said. "You said you never met her." "I said I didn't know her." "You knew her enough to be photographed with her." He looked down. Everyone knew Emily. That sentence stayed in the room. Everyone knew Emily, a phrase that sounded harmless. But after decades of silence, it carried a different meaning. Because if everyone knew Emily, why did no one know what happened to her? The investigators began rebuilding the final week of Emily Marsh's life. They discovered she had been helping organize a school charity event. She had visited Hawthorne Estate because the property owner had offered old decorations and furniture for the fundraiser. Several people remembered seeing her there. Several people remembered seeing other people there too. But their memories had changed over time. Some forgot details. Some mixed dates together. Some convinced themselves certain things were impossible. The human mind protects itself from painful truths. And sometimes that protection becomes another locked door. The most important discovery came from Emily's old diary. Her family had stored away for years, believing it contained nothing useful. Most entries described ordinary teenage life. School problems, friendships, dreams of traveling, arguments with her brother. But 3 pages before her disappearance, one sentence stood out. Someone at Hawthorne keeps lying about what happened that night. There was no name, no explanation, only that sentence. And beneath it, a drawing of a small black bird. Detective Carter recognized the symbol. The same symbol had been carved into a wooden beam inside the greenhouse. A mark nobody noticed during the first investigation. A mark that had been hidden beneath layers of paint for years. The symbol led investigators to another forgotten witness. A former employee of Hawthorne Estate named Clara Whitmore. She had left Blackridge in 2005 and lived hundreds of miles away. When detectives found her, she refused to speak at first. Then they showed her the symbol. Her reaction was immediate. She became silent. Then she began crying. "I thought it was over," she whispered. "What was over?" Carter asked. Clara looked toward the window. The night Emily disappeared. The interview lasted 6 hours. And for the first time, someone described what happened inside Hawthorne Estate that night. Not everything. Not yet. But enough to confirm investigators were no longer chasing a mystery. They were chasing a secret. Clara revealed that on the night Emily vanished, she saw 3 people near the greenhouse. Emily, Thomas Reed, and Adrian Vale. She remembered an argument. She remembered raised voices. She remembered Emily leaving the greenhouse area alone. But she also remembered something that haunted her for 23 years. A sound, a single scream. Not long, not loud, just enough. Then silence. The reason she never came forward was not because she did not care. It was because someone convinced her that speaking would destroy her family. Someone threatened her. Someone knew where she lived. Someone knew what she feared. The investigation suddenly expanded. Adrian Vale became the center of attention. But there was one problem. He had disappeared years earlier. No current address. No active accounts. No recent photographs. A man who had vanished from public life almost as completely as Emily had vanished from Blackridge. Then, just as detectives prepared an international search request, another message arrived. No return address. No fingerprint. Only a handwritten note delivered directly to the police station. For words, you found the wrong man. Carter stared at the message for several seconds. Because the handwriting was not unfamiliar. It matched the old maintenance records. The same handwriting from the notebook Arthur Bell brought in. The same handwriting investigators had overlooked for decades. And beneath the message was a final line. A location. A place outside Blackridge. A place where, according to the note, Emily Marsh had been waiting for someone to find her all along. The legal machinery of the state moves with a cold, procedural inevitability once confession is secured and the physical evidence is brought to light, operating with a detached precision that contrasts sharply with the raw human agony of the crime. Arthur Pendleton was formally charged with the abduction and murder of Sarah Jennings at a special closed hearing at Manchester Magistrates Court, his physical weakness requiring him to appear via video link from a secure medical wing. He sat in a wheelchair, wrapped in a gray prison blanket, looking small and insignificant on the high-definition monitor as the clerk read out charges that carried the weight of a historic atrocity. He entered a plea of guilty with a single, barely audible nod of his head, bypassing the need for a lengthy, traumatic criminal trial that would have forced the family to listen to the graphic details of Sarah's death. The Crown Prosecution Service, working in tandem with New Scotland Yard, presented a comprehensive case file that laid out the entire timeline of the crime, demonstrating that Pendleton had acted entirely alone, driven by a deeply hidden, predatory compulsion that he had managed to suppress for the rest of his life. The sentencing hearing, held at the Old Bailey in London, was a somber, heavily secured event, with the public gallery packed capacity with journalists, legal observers, and members of the public who had followed the case since 2003. The judge, a veteran of the criminal courts who had seen the worst of human behavior, did not mince words when addressing the defendant, describing his actions as a masterpiece of cowardice and cruelty that had inflicted 23 years of psychological torture on an innocent family. Because of his terminal illness, the mandatory life sentence carried no practical hope of rehabilitation or release. He was destined to die behind bars, his final days spent under the watchful eye of prison guards in a high-security medical facility. The sentence was a legal victory, but offered little comfort to those who realized that Pendleton had enjoyed 23 years of freedom, safety, and ordinary life that he had denied to his teenage victim. He had stolen a lifetime from a 16-year-old girl, lived his own to the threshold of old age, and surrendered only when the bill for his sins was about to be collected by nature itself. The courtroom cleared quickly after the gavel fell, leaving behind an empty dock and a lingering sense of unease, a realization that justice, when it comes this late, feels less like a triumph and more like a postscript to a tragedy that should never have happened. Every word spoken during that sentencing echoed to the wood panel walls of Court Number 1, like a dull, rhythmic hammer blow against the collective conscience of the city. The prosecutor detailed how Pendleton had meticulously maintained his silence through decades of shifting social landscapes, economic changes, and technological revolutions, completely untouched by the grief radiating from the East End. In the gallery, the remaining members of the Jennings family sat completely rigid, their faces frozen in a mask of exhausted sorrow as the legal narrative formally stripped away any remaining ambiguity about Sarah's final hours. The defense barrister spoke briefly, offering no excuses, no pleas for mercy, and no justifications, recognizing that any attempt to mitigate the horror of a 23-year deception would be an insult to the court. Pendleton himself stared straight ahead of the camera lens in his remote room, his expression completely vacant, showing neither remorse nor fear, an empty vessel waiting for the inevitable conclusion of a life built on a foundation of absolute malice. The journalists in the press box scribbled furiously, their laptops clicking like a swarm of insects as they prepared to broadcast the final legal metrics of a case that had dominated the national psyche for weeks. Outside the courthouse, the standard London traffic roared past, indifferent to the fact that one of the city's ghost files was being closed forever under the weight of a mandatory life sentence with no possibility of parole. The documentation generated by the conviction was immense. Thousands of pages of legal briefs, forensic attachments, and psychological assessments that would be filed away into the permanent archives of British criminal history. Criminologists would spend years analyzing the transcripts, try to decode the specific mental architecture of a man who could murder a child, and then spend 2 decades being a helpful neighbor and an unremarkable husband. The system had functioned exactly as it was designed to, processing the confession, verifying the evidence, and delivering the maximum penalty allowed under the law. Yet the atmosphere within the legal community remained deeply somber. There were no congratulations among the prosecuting team, no celebratory statements on the steps of the Old Bailey, only a quiet, heavy acknowledgement that the legal system is a tool for order, not a machine that can restore what was broken. The formal closing of the case file was a bureaucratic necessity, but it left behind a profound emptiness, a stark reminder that the law can punish the guilty, but it can never truly compensate the victims for the years stolen by a predator's calculations. As the prison transport van prepared to move Pendleton to the high-security medical wing where he would spend his remaining weeks, the city seemed to pull its collar up against the damp air, absorbing the reality that some mysteries end not with a brilliant flash of detective work, but with a grim, administrative surrender in a quiet courtroom. The ripple effect of the solved cold case extend far beyond the sterile confines of the courtroom, forcing society to aggressively re-examine its own history and the comfortable stories it tells itself about public safety, vigilance, and the inevitability of justice. In the intense weeks following Pendleton's historic sentencing, New Scotland Yard launched a massive, unprecedented internal audit of all unsolved missing persons and unresolved homicide files from the late 1990s and early 2000s, searching for any hidden patterns that could link the dying killer to other unresolved disappearances across the United Kingdom. A newly formed, dedicated task force began the grueling process of retracing Pendleton's historic commercial logistics routes across the country, meticulously cross-referencing his old delivery schedules and fuel receipts with cold case databases in Norfolk, Essex, and Yorkshire to ensure that Sarah Jennings was indeed his only victim. The terrifying revelation that an ordinary, completely unremarkable delivery driver could seamlessly exploit the severe technological limitations of the era to commit a flawless crime sent immediate shockwaves through the entire British law enforcement community, leading to a complete, top-to-bottom overhaul of how modern cold cases are prioritized, categorized, and systematically reviewed. Criminologists and behavior analysts quickly noted that Pendleton represented a profoundly terrifying category of offender, the single-incident sociopath, an individual who commits a monstrous, highly calculated act with perfect precision and then completely stops, reintegrating into conventional society without ever triggering the behavioral alarms or psychological markers that tip off local police. This specific case completely demolished the traditional, long-held criminal profiling belief that serial predators always escalate, display a compulsion to repeat their crimes, or leave an evolving signature until they are inevitably caught, exposing a terrifying vulnerability in the predictive models used by major police forces worldwide for decades. Meanwhile, investigative journalists and true crime researchers published deep-dive exposés on the severe structural blind spots of 2003 London, showing how a catastrophic combination of fragmented analog CCTV coverage, poor interagency communication, and the underlying social biases of the time had allowed Pendleton to slip entirely through the initial dragnet undetected. The general public felt a sudden, collective wave of intense vulnerability, realizing with a chill that the modern, hyper-connected world of total surveillance, facial recognition, and digital footprints was built directly upon the fragile foundations of an older, much darker city where a vulnerable person could disappear completely in a single 100-meter stretch of road and never be found. The tragic story of Sarah Jennings instantly became a landmark case study in modern British criminology, immediately integrated into the curriculum at major police academies as a stark, cautionary tale about the absolute dangers of investigative assumptions and the critical necessity of relentless, meticulous ground-level investigation. It proved to an entire generation of law enforcement officers that time is never an ally of justice, but rather a protective camouflage that allows monsters to grow old, fragile, and seemingly innocent in the warm sunlight, while their victims remain permanently trapped in the dark, forgotten corners of urban history. Every archive pulled from the basement of the Met was scanned for similar signatures, as detectives realized that the quiet man down the street, the one who never caused trouble and always paid his taxes on time, could be harboring secrets that would paralyze a community if ever brought to light. As the media circus began to slowly recede from the steps of the Old Bailey, the deeper institutional panic only intensified within the walls of the Home Office, where policymakers scrambled to understand how a killer could hide in plain sight for nearly a quarter of a century without a single crack appearing in his facade. Public forums and late-night broadcast panels debated the terrifying concept of the dormant predator, questioning whether the current systems of community monitoring and background checks were truly adequate to detect a monster who possessed the supreme discipline to commit a single perfect horror and then lock it away forever. Neighbors who lived alongside Pendleton in his quiet Manchester suburb for over 20 years were besieged by documentary crews eager to capture the precise moment their perception of reality shattered, forcing them to look back at every mundane interaction, every borrowed lawnmower, every polite wave across the garden fence, with a toxic retrofitted suspicion. The realization that human depravity does not always announce itself through erratic behavior or social alienation, but can instead cloak itself in absolute, mind-numbing normalcy, created a profound crisis of trust within local communities across the nation. True Crime Podcast dissected every frame of the grainy 2003 security footage, pointing out the exact second Sarah walked into the shadow of the bridge, turning a simple piece of historical evidence into a grim, universally recognized symbol of the fragile boundary that separates a normal evening from a permanent descent into the void. The financial and bureaucratic mechanisms required to sustain this massive retrospective investigation were staggering, drawing resources away from active cases to fund a desperate scramble into the past, as if the modern state was trying to retroactively police a century that had already slipped through its fingers. Teams of specialized digital forensics experts worked to digitize and enhance thousands of hours of decaying VHS surveillance tapes from neighboring boroughs, desperate to ensure that Pendleton's silver delivery van hadn't dropped into the background of another forgotten tragedy. This frantic activity served as a form of collective institutional penance, an admission that the early digital age had promised a level of security it was fundamentally incapable of delivering, leaving a generation of vulnerable citizens exposed to predators who understood the cracks in the system far better than the architects themselves. The name Sarah Jennings became permanently synonymous with this painful transition period. Her legacy transformed from a localized tragedy into a sweeping catalyst for a total reinvention of forensic methodology and victim advocacy in the 21st century. Yet, despite the grand announcements of policy changes, new task forces, and advanced tracking databases, an underlying sense of profound futility remained, a quiet acknowledgement among veteran investigators that no amount of modern technology could ever retroactively intervene beneath that dark railway bridge in the winter of 2003. The ultimate resolution of the London 2003 cold case brings a quiet, heavy, and exhausting closure to the capital, but the deep, echoing vibrations of the crime will remain permanently etched into its massive concrete fabric forever. In June 2026, a small, strictly private funeral service was held for Sarah Jennings at a quiet, historic churchyard just a short distance from a Mile End Road, 23 long years after she walked out of the flour-dusted bakery and vanished straight into the choking November fog. There were absolutely no media cameras allowed inside the cemetery gates, no sensational, gripping headlines plastered on the stone walls, just an aging, heartbroken mother, a few quiet relatives whose lives have been permanently altered by decades of grief, and Detective Superintendent Vance standing respectfully under a somber canopy of black umbrellas as a relentless rain fell softly onto a small, polished wooden casket. Sarah was finally laid to rest under her real name, her memory cleansed of the clinical, terrifying word missing that had defined her existence to the public for a generation, replaced by a simple, elegant headstone that spoke only of a daughter who was deeply loved, fiercely missed, and never forgotten to the passing eras. Arthur Pendleton died quietly in his prison bed less than 3 weeks later, his passing marked by a brief, routine administrative announcement from the Ministry of Justice, his name destined to become a historical footnote of human cruelty, while profound horror of his sudden confession remains a permanent, painful scar on the collective conscience of the community. The massive mile-end railway bridge still stands tall against the gray sky, its dark, historic brickwork now completely covered in vibrant street art, modern neon murals, and high-definition security cameras that monitor every square inch of the wet pavement with an unblinking, digital precision that came decades too late. The small bakery where she worked her last shift has long since been replaced by a trendy, fast-paced coffee shop. Its young, vibrant patrons completely unaware of the immense tragedy that began at the very counter, where they ordered their morning espresso every single day. But for those specific individuals who lived through that dark winter of 2003, the street will always hold a phantom, unmistakable chill, a lingering, suffocating reminder of the night the fog took Sarah Jennings and held her darkest secret for 23 agonizing years. The long, winding story ends not with grand, triumphant revelation of human brilliance or cinematic justice, but with a sobering, permanent truth that some deep wounds never fully heal. They just finally stop bleeding when there is absolutely nothing left to lose. London moves forward with a relentless, unyielding velocity, its crowded streets bustling with infinite life, its bright neon lights reflecting off the wet asphalt, a massive city that has seen 1,000 terrible crimes and buried 1,000 dark secrets, yet continues to march blindly toward tomorrow, leaving the quiet ghost of its past to rest in the cold, silent earth of human memory. Every evening as the sun dips below the horizon and the street lamps flicker to life in the East End, the shadow on the bridge grows long and deep, a physical manifestation of the void that consumed a 16-year-old girl and kept a nation waiting for answers that arrived only at the very end of a killer's life. The cold case files for 2003 are finally bound in heavy leather, marked with the stamp of completion, and moved from the active desks of New Scotland Yard down to the historical archives, where they will sit undisturbed as a testament to an era of darkness that took a quarter of a century to fully illuminate. The silence that now surrounds the case is entirely different from the heavy, anxious silence that plagued the family for over 2 decades. It is the silence of an ending, a final period marked at the bottom of a page that had been left violently blank for far too long. Margaret Jennings no longer sits by the window in her bow flat when midnight approaches, her long, painful vigil finally dissolved by the cold certainty of the forensic reports and the quiet finality of the cemetery grounds. The community has absorbed the shock of Pendleton's double life, integrating the terrifying knowledge into the local folklore, a cautionary tale whispered to teenagers as they walk home from late shifts along the expanding, brightly lit corridors of the modern metropolis. Detective Superintendent Vance, walking past the mile-end underpass one final time before her own retirement paperwork is processed, looks up at the flashing blue status lights of the modern surveillance grid, knowing that while technology can change the landscape of prevention, it can never rewrite the tragic geography of the past. The rain continues its steady, indifferent cadence against the concrete pillars of the railway bridge, washing away the modern dust just as it once washed away the tracks of a silver delivery van, leaving the city to maintain its permanent, unblinking watch over the living, while the dead are finally left the peace they were denied for 23 long years.